Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've come far enough for today. It's time to slow down now, to leave behind the glow of your screen, the buzzing notifications, and the endless scrolling. We're going somewhere quieter, somewhere older, somewhere forgotten. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight we visit the letterbox. The shape of a letterbox. Do you remember the shape of it? Not the email kind. Not the inbox on your phone. No, I mean the real letterbox. Often red, sometimes blue, or made of iron, quietly standing on a corner, like a sentinel of words. Some were square, some round, some with little doors that creaked. When you lifted them, you would walk up to it, envelope in hand, heart quietly beating with the thrill of sending. You'd lift the flap, slide the letter in, and then you'd wait. You'd wait, not for seconds or minutes, but for days, sometimes weeks. And somehow, that waiting was part of the magic. Writing slowly. Before you sent a letter, you had to write it with a pen or a pencil, sometimes on scented paper, sometimes on a postcard, from a place far away. You had to think before the ink touched the paper, because once it was written, you couldn't unsend it. You couldn't delete. You could only cross it out, a visible scar of a changed mind. There was something comforting about that. Your words were slower, softer, more intentional. You didn't write, "I'm fine, thanks." You wrote, "I've been thinking of you lately. The leaves have started to fall here, and I remembered how you used to press them between pages of your books." That kind of writing didn't come from a notification. It came from the quiet, from sitting still, from listening inward. Stamps and the ceremony of sending. And then there were stamps, tiny works of art, some with birds, or kings, or strange buildings you'd never seen in real life. You'd lick the back, the faint taste of glue, and press it carefully into the top corner of your envelope. There was a kind of dignity to that act, a final seal, a whispered promise. This is ready to go. I've said what I meant. Let it fly. Then you'd carry it to the letterbox, through streets, through wind or sun, maybe with your scarf wrapped tight, or an umbrella dripping by your side, and you'd slide the letter in. Gone. No tracking number. No read receipt. Just trust. Waiting. And then, you waited. Not with impatience. Not with frustration. But with wonder. You didn't know where it was, or how long it would take, or what kind of mood the reader would be in when they opened it. But you hoped. You believed. In the journey your words were making. You pictured them, crossing fields, riding in a bag on someone's shoulder, sitting quietly among 100 other stories. In a dusty room, the waiting wasn't wasted time. It was filled with imagining, receiving, and then, someday, you'd hear a sound, a soft knock, the gentle clink of metal against metal. You'd rush to the door, or the gate, or the little box at the end of the drive. And there, like a message from another world, would be an envelope with your name on it. Your name, not your username, not your handle, just you, in handwriting that made your chest warm. Maybe it was neat, or maybe it was sloppy, and trailed off like it had gotten tired. You'd tear it open, with fingers that shook just a little. And then you'd read. Not skim. Not scan. But read. every word, and you'd feel like someone had come and sat beside you, even if they were miles and oceans away. The letterbox as a keeper of secrets. The letterbox kept secrets. It didn't peek. It didn't scroll. It just received and delivered love letters, birthday cards, apologies, goodbyes, even bad news, folded into creased pages, sometimes with smudges that might have been tears. The letterbox knew how to hold all of it without judgment. It was a quiet witness to human tenderness, to vulnerability, sealed behind paper. What we lost. And then, slowly, we stopped using it. We still have mail. Yes. But how often do you receive a letter meant just for you? How often do you sit down to write one? We traded waiting for instant replies. We traded stamps for emojis. And somewhere along the way, we lost something. Not entirely, but enough to notice, enough to miss. That small thrill of lifting a lid and wondering if today's the day you'll find someone's heart folded up inside a white envelope. A quiet return. But maybe, once in a while, we can return. Maybe tomorrow, you'll find a blank sheet of paper, a pen that still works, an address you remember by heart. Maybe you'll write something. Not long. Just enough. Enough to say, I was thinking of you today, and I thought you should know. And maybe someone, somewhere, will feel that warmth when they open their letterbox. And remember, that words can travel without electricity, only intention, only kindness, only time. The letterbox is still there, even if it's a little rusted, a little lonely. It's waiting, and it doesn't mind waiting. And now, so are you. You're resting, breathing, drifting. The presence of the clock tower. There was once a time when you didn't know the hour. Until you looked up, you'd hear a chime, a deep, resonant bell, cutting through the city noise. Maybe once, maybe 12 times, maybe a half-hour's echo, ringing over cobblestone streets. You'd stop, tilt your head, and count. 1, 2, 3. The public clock stood high above, like a quiet ruler of the day. It didn't ask for attention. It simply was. Steady, certain, always there. It didn't buzz in your hand. It didn't blink on a screen. It didn't demand your focus every 5 minutes. Instead, it gave you time, as a gift, not a burden. Time came in chimes, in shadows cast by great arms, moving ever so slowly, across a round, distant face. The village clock. In small villages, the clock tower often sat atop the church, or the town hall, a modest steeple, with weathered numbers, and hands that creaked with age. The paint might flake. The hands might lag by a minute or two. But no one minded. Time was not about seconds. It was about rhythm. You rose with the morning bell. You paused at noon. You began to gather your coat and hat. As the evening hour neared, it was a conversation between people and time, not a command. And the clock, like a wise old friend, was never in a hurry. The clock is a landmark. These clocks were more than timekeepers. They were places. You'd say, I'll meet you under the clock, and you knew exactly where. You'd wait beneath it, looking up, watching the hands creep forward, wondering if they, too, were as impatient as you. Couples met there. Strangers bumped into one another. Children sat on the steps beneath it, eating sweets, and watching pigeons bob across the plaza. The clock never judged. It ticked on, regardless of who stood beneath it, rich or poor, lonely or in love. Everyone stood, under the same time. Train stations and the pursuit of punctuality. Then came the trains. Ah yes, the mighty locomotives. The steam, the soot, the sound of wheels on tracks. With them came the need for precision. No more guessing. No more about noon. Time had to be exact. The public clocks were adjusted, synchronized, standardized. You'd arrive at the station, look up at the enormous clock face, and know to the minute if you were early or already too late. And yet, there was beauty in that too. That giant round face, often made of frosted glass, and trimmed with brass or black iron. It watched over millions of journeys. It saw people leave and return, and it kept ticking, even when hearts raced, even when goodbyes lingered. The clock didn't stop, for sadness or joy. It just kept going, a steady beat, in the great rhythm of travel, the town bell and the human heart. Some clocks didn't have faces. They only had voices. Bells, ringing out, over fields and valleys, carried on the wind, sometimes deep and booming, sometimes high and light. You didn't need to see the clock. You heard it, felt it, in your chest, a heartbeat, shared by the whole town. When the bell rang, you knew. The hour had changed. Time had moved on. And yet, you weren't late. You were simply in step. Time becomes personal. But time, as it often does, became more personal. Watches appeared. Pocket-sized time, tied to a chain, tucked in a vest, checked quietly, with a flick of the hand. Then came wristwatches, ticking close to the pulse, constantly present. Then came digital clocks. Then came phones. Then came calendars, and countdowns, and reminders, and alerts. Time began to insist. No longer a chime. Across the village. Now it was a buzz in your pocket, a number on your wrist, a ping in your ear. Always urgent. Always now. And the public clocks? They faded. Their bells stopped. Their hands rusted. Their faces faded in the sun. People stopped looking up. The forgotten clock. But look around, and you'll still find them. In the corner of a plaza. Above an old theater. Half hidden by ivy. On the side of a brick building. No one notices anymore. They're still there. Still ticking. Or sometimes, just pretending to. Their hands frozen at 4:17. Or 6:45. Or some other moment. Lost to time. And yet, they still offer something. A quiet reminder. That time can be seen. Not just felt. That you can look up, instead of down. That time, when shared, feels a little less heavy. The return of stillness. And maybe, just maybe, there's a kind of peace in not always knowing the exact second. Maybe it's okay to measure time in chimes and shadows and the hush of early evening. Maybe public clocks will one day ring again, not because we need them to, but because we want to be reminded that time doesn't have to chase us. It can walk beside us. It can wait, just like this moment, just like this quiet breath you're taking now. Now, we meet the typewriter, the mechanical whisperer of letters, poems, and dusty office memos. You may never have used one, or maybe your fingers still remember the keys. Either way, let's step softly back into the world of the typewriter's soft thunder, the shape and weight of thought. Before the screen, before the cursor blinking, like a tiny, impatient eye, there was the typewriter. It didn't glow. It didn't update. It was a machine, but also something more. It was a tool that turned thought into sound. Each key pressed was a declaration, a letter forced up from a metal arm, slapping ink onto paper, with a satisfying clack. And oh, the rhythm of it. It was not silent writing. It was percussion, soft thunder, echoing in libraries, in newsrooms, in bedrooms lit by weak lamps. Tick, tuck, tuck, ting, zzz. That sound meant you were doing something, making something, creating something real. The dance of fingers and thought. Typing on a typewriter was like dancing. Your fingers moved, but each step had weight. Each misstep, a mistake on the page. No backspace, no delete. If you got it wrong, you had to live with it, strike through it, or start again. There was pressure, but also freedom. It made you think. Before you spoke in ink, it made you deliberate, made your words earn their place. On the page, you didn't write 1,000 drafts. You wrote one, and you hoped it was enough. And somehow, it often was. The ritual of writing, to use a typewriter, was to perform a ritual. You'd sit down, maybe with tea, maybe with a cigarette, maybe just silence. You'd roll in a fresh sheet of paper. Feel it catch. As the roller grabbed it, turn the knob, set it straight. You'd poise your fingers above the keys. Smooth black caps, sometimes glass-topped, or square and gray like early mornings. And then, you'd begin. Click, clack, click. A sentence formed. Then a paragraph. Soon a page. The machine didn't distract you. It didn't tempt you with tabs, or apps, or endless notifications. It only offered a blank page, and the means to fill it. Nothing more, nothing less. A symphony of stories. Imagine a newsroom in 1940. Dozens of typewriters, clicking at once. The air filled with smoke. And urgency. Reporters hammering out the latest headlines. Ink ribbons snapping forward. Metal arms clashing like cymbals. It wasn't chaotic. It was symphonic. Each clatter was part of a larger rhythm. And in every corner of the room, stories were being born. Or picture a poet in a one-room apartment, rain against the window, a blanket around their shoulders, typing slowly, hunting for the right word. Each key pressed, echoed like hope, like honesty. The typewriter didn't judge. It just waited for your fingers to speak. The ink ribbon and its secrets. There was something strange and beautiful about the ink ribbon, a thin strip of black or red, tucked into the heart of the machine. It fed through, as you typed, carrying the ghosts of every letter ever written. If you looked closely, you could see it, tiny shadows of words already typed, faint and reversed. A hidden story. Inside a story. The ribbon remembered everything, even if you didn't. The end of a page. When you reached the end of a line, the machine reminded you. Ting! That delicate bell. So soft. So firm. And then you'd reach up, grab the carriage return lever, and swipe it left. That movement, that gesture, was like turning a corner in your mind. The typewriter gave you rhythm, pace, structure. Each page had a beginning, a middle, an end. You saw it, felt it. Every page finished was an accomplishment, not just data, but proof. The rise of the quiet machines. Eventually, of course, typewriters gave way to quieter things. Word processors, laptops, touchscreens. The clatter faded. The thunder grew silent. People typed faster, but thought less. They erased and retyped. A dozen times. They no longer lived. With their mistakes. And the typewriters? They were boxed, stored, thrown away. or placed on shelves, as decoration. Pretty relics, with no voice, but not gone. Still, somewhere, a typewriter waits, in a dusty attic, or a flea market booth, or the corner of a curious cafe. Maybe one day, you'll find it, touch its keys, roll the carriage. You'll feel the weight, the promise. You might even write a word. And in that moment, you'll hear it again. The soft thunder, the heartbeat of thought, turned into action. The music, of words made real. The shape of sound. A cassette tape fits in your hand. Like a secret. 2 spools. 1 ribbon. A clear plastic shell. With tiny screws holding it all together. It looks simple. But inside, a world of sound. Music. Voices. Laughter. Stories. All captured. On a thin strip. Of magnetic tape. Imagine that. Emotions. Etched into particles. So small. They can barely be seen. But you could hear them. Oh, how you could hear them. The ritual of the play button. Playing a tape was never instant. First, you'd slide it into the player. Maybe a Walkman. Or a stereo. Or the dashboard of your dad's old car. You'd close the door. With a satisfying click. Then, press play. You'd hear that soft mechanical sound. The whir of spools spinning. The gentle ka-chunk of magnetic heads aligning. Then the music would begin. But not like digital music. No, this music came. With a breath. A hiss. A whisper. That said, I was recorded. I was real. The mixed tape, a love letter with a spine. Cassette tapes were never just for albums. They were for mixtapes. A curated collection of feelings. Side A, songs that say, I like you. Side B, songs that scream, I miss you. Making a mixtape was an art. You had to time it just right. Fit the perfect number of minutes. On each side. Fade out just before. The tape ran out. You'd press record. Wait. Stop. Rewind. Play. And again. And again. It wasn't just sharing music. It was bearing your heart. In analog, you'd give someone that tape, handwritten labels and all, and hope they understood what you couldn't say out loud. Rewinding was a journey. If you wanted to hear that song again, you couldn't just tap back. You had to rewind. Hold the button down. Listen to the whirring. Watch the tape spools. Spin in reverse. Like time unwinding itself. Sometimes you'd rewind too far. Sometimes not enough. It didn't matter. The point wasn't to get there fast. The point was the pause. The wait. The anticipation of something beautiful. Coming again. Tapes in the car. There's something magical about a cassette tape. In a car stereo, the sound wasn't perfect. Sometimes the bass was muddy. Sometimes the tape squeaked. But it felt right. The sun through the windshield. The world passing by. Your hand resting on the gear shift. Your favorite song playing. For the 50th time. And when the tape ended, you'd hear the click. Side A finished. So you'd pop it out. Flip it. Slide it back in. And just like that, Side B began. A new beginning. Right in the middle of the journey. The fragility of memory. Tapes could break. They could melt in the sun. They could get eaten by a hungry stereo. You'd pull it out, and the ribbon would be tangled. Spaghetti-thin loops. Hanging in your hand. But you didn't throw it away. No. You found a pencil. Slid it into the spool. And gently, ever so gently, you rewound it. By hand. Crank by crank. Minute by minute. Fixing your memory. With patience. With care. The ghost of the record button. Every tape deck had A record button, sometimes red, sometimes just a small circle. Beside play, you'd press them both, play plus record, and suddenly, you were capturing the moment. A birthday party, a radio broadcast, your voice, awkward and uncertain, saying hello into the built-in mic. You were creating a time capsule, a version of you that would echo for years. If someone finds that tape now, they'll hear you as you were. The same laugh, the same shyness, trapped in time, set free by sound. When the music warped, sometimes the tape would stretch, the song would dip, lower and slower, like a melting memory. Your favorite singer, suddenly underwater, the drums lagging behind. And somehow, you didn't mind, because the song still lived. Even damaged, even changed, it was still yours. The tapes we kept, people still keep them. Boxes of tapes. In the attic, drawers full of unlabeled plastic shells. Why? Because those tapes hold more than music. They hold moments. The drive to college. The song at your first dance. Your best friend's laugh. In the background, as you pressed record and said something dumb into the mic. Digital files don't age. They don't warp. They don't hiss. But cassettes remember. They carry the wear and warmth of being played. Now, we talk about postcards. Tiny rectangles of cardboard, sent across the world, carrying the smallest of messages, and somehow, the largest pieces of someone's heart. So nestlein. Pull the blanket closer, and let's open the mailbox of memory, a window to somewhere else. A postcard is not just a card. It's a window, a picture, from somewhere you're not. It could be a palm tree, bending in the wind, a snow-covered mountain, a crooked street, in an old European town. And on the other side, a message, sometimes only a sentence, sometimes barely legible, but always written, with the thought, I wish you were here. Postcards were proof that someone had gone somewhere and thought of you while they were there. The ritual of sending. In a world before selfies, before instant stories, you traveled with a pen. You walked into a tiny shop, with racks spinning slowly, each one filled with glossy images. You picked one, or 5, or 20. Then you sat somewhere quiet, maybe at a cafe table, maybe on a hotel bed, with your feet still sandy. And you wrote, Hello from Venice. The pigeons here are fearless. Wish you could see this sunset in Santorini. This beach feels like the end of the world. Short, simple, and yet, so full. You wrote the address carefully. You licked the stamp. You dropped it into a red or yellow or green mailbox. And then, you let go, hoping it would reach them, knowing that even if it didn't, you had sent a piece of yourself into the world. The handwriting that remains. A postcard ages. The edges curl. The colors fade. But the handwriting? That stays. It's messy, or neat, or loopy, or all caps. But it's theirs. It's ink they touched, letters they formed, while squinting against the sun, or fighting jet lag. In a dim hotel room, long after the trip is forgotten, long after the place on the picture has changed or disappeared, the handwriting remains. And in it, so do they. When distance was measured in days, there was something beautiful about waiting. A postcard didn't arrive the next minute or the next hour. It came days later, sometimes weeks, sometimes longer. By the time you received it, the sender was already home, already back to the familiar. But you still held that frozen moment, the mountain they saw, the thought they had, the time they took to stop and write. It made the world feel both larger and smaller, faraway places, right in your hands. The picture on the front. Postcards were sometimes cheesy. A staged photo, a too bright beach, a cartoon camel, a blurry night skyline from the 1980s. But they were also perfect. They showed you what the sender thought was worth sharing. Sometimes it was the Eiffel Tower. Sometimes it was a goat in a sweater. And you would look at it again and again, long after it had arrived, because it was more than a picture. It was a souvenir of someone's experience, of a world bigger than yours. And it made you wonder, what would you send? If you could. The ones we never sent. Not all postcards get mailed. Some stay in the suitcase, in the bottom of a drawer, in the pages of a book. Blank, unwritten, but heavy with intention. Maybe we meant to send it. Maybe we couldn't find a stamp. Maybe the words didn't come. Or maybe some feelings were too big. 4 by 6 inches. And so the card stayed with us, like a private memory, a silent letter, to no one. And that's okay. Not all messages need a recipient to matter. The wall of memories. Some people keep them, pinned to cork boards, taped to the fridge, stacked in shoeboxes, little slices of somewhere else, with a name, a date, a silly drawing of a sun. In the corner, they're the souvenirs. That didn't need wrapping. And the messages? They still speak. Thinking of you. Wish you were here. Don't forget me. They whisper. Long after the ink has faded. Digital goodbyes, paper hellos. Today, we send hearts and emojis. But emojis fade. They scroll away. A postcard? It stays. It sits on a desk. It waits on a windowsill. It doesn't need to be plugged in. It doesn't update. It just exists. Tangible. Earnest. Real. It reminds you that someone stopped in the middle of somewhere and thought of you. That's a kind of love the internet still hasn't mastered. The phone booth, when conversations had doors. The sky is darker now, even quieter than before. A perfect time to remember something that once stood on street corners, in malls, in gas stations by lonely highways. Tonight, we step inside a phone booth, a glass box, a metal cradle, a space where voices stretched across distance, before cell phones, before Wi-Fi, before all this noise. A booth, a number, a coin, and a voice that mattered. So let's step inside together, close the door, and listen. The booth itself. It was a little room, just big enough for one person. Sometimes two, if you squeezed close. Glass walls, a metal shelf, a heavy receiver, dangling on a hook. It smelled like cold metal, and maybe old cigarettes, sometimes fresh rain. And above all, it had silence, even when cars rushed by outside. Inside the booth, it felt separate, a moment carved out from the rushing world. You stepped inside, and suddenly, you had permission to pause. The ritual of the call. To make a call, you needed coins, quarters, or tokens, sometimes a phone card, with numbers to scratch and dial. You'd feed them in, one by one. Clink, clink, clink. The phone would hum to life. A dull tone, waiting. Then you'd dial, each button pressing down, with a soft beep, like piano keys, made of plastic. You'd wait, and then, a voice. Hello. And just like that, you weren't alone anymore. Conversations with weight. A phone booth call wasn't casual. It wasn't for small talk. Not usually. You were there. Because it mattered. You needed to hear them. Or they needed to hear you. Maybe it was good news. I got the job. I'm on my way. I miss you. Maybe it was harder. I'm sorry. She didn't make it. Please forgive me. But whatever it was real. Raw. Exposed. Held together. By a wire and a heartbeat. When you had to wait your turn. Phone booths weren't always empty. Sometimes you had to wait. A line forming outside. Someone inside. Deep in conversation. Gesturing wildly. Or pressing their forehead. Against the glass. You'd look away. You weren't supposed to listen. But you did. How could you not? The words were muffled. But the emotion poured through the glass. You weren't eavesdropping. You were witnessing. Life. Happening. 1/4 at a time. Privacy in public. A strange thing. You were in public. Yet alone. You could be crying. And no one would hear. You could be laughing. And no one would know why. The booth became a cocoon. A space to confess. To connect. To break down. Or build up. Sometimes. People stayed longer than the coins allowed. The call would cut off. A click. A silence. And they'd just stand there. Receiver still in hand. Not quite ready. To return to the world. Emergency calls and late night pleas. Phone booths were there. When you needed them most. Stranded? You called for help. Heartbroken? You called someone who could listen. Late at night, bathed in yellow streetlight, the booth was a beacon, a lighthouse, for the emotionally shipwrecked. The booth didn't ask questions. It didn't judge. It just rang, and waited, for someone to answer. The sound of the receiver, picking up the receiver, was an act of intention. It was heavy, solid. You had to press it to your ear. You had to lean in. You had to listen. No speakerphone. No Bluetooth. Just a direct line. From your voice. To someone else's ear. And when the call ended, you didn't just press a button. You hung up. Literally. With a clack. A weight. A finality. You could feel in your hand. Phone numbers that meant something. Back then, we remembered numbers. You didn't scroll through a contact list. You remembered the digits. Your mom's number. Your best friend's landline. Your crush's number. You wrote in the back of a notebook and stared at for days before daring to dial. And when you called, you hoped they were home, that they'd pick up, that their voice would say your name with warmth. Numbers weren't just data. They were doors. And each call was a knock on someone's heart. The last booth. Most booths are gone now. Torn down. Removed. Replaced by nothing. Maybe a stain on the sidewalk. Maybe 4 rusty bolts. Where it once stood. Some are preserved. In museums. Or turned into art installations. But most? Gone. And with them, that strange, quiet magic of stepping into a glass box and reaching across the world with just your voice. Libraries, cathedrals of quiet knowledge. You've wandered far tonight, past postcards, into phone booths, down long-forgotten streets. But now, let's open a quieter door. A tall wooden door. Hinges creaking. A soft hush waiting beyond it. Welcome to the library. Not the one on your tablet. Not the cloud of PDFs. Or bookmarks you forgot. No, this is the real thing. Shelves. Spines. Silence so thick. You could write your name in it. Tonight, we'll wander the aisles together. No need for a library card. Just curiosity. And the willingness to whisper. The smell of old pages. Let's start with the smell. Because if you've ever stepped into a proper old library. You know it. That scent of dust, ink, wood polish, and something softer. Something like time. It's the smell of thousands of thoughts, trapped in paper, a forest of minds, pressed into quiet, waiting forms. You inhale it, and it feels like knowledge is climbing into your lungs. The architecture of stillness. Libraries were built like temples, tall ceilings, stone steps, archways, echoes. Every whisper feels like it matters. The architecture itself tells you, be still. Here, words are sacred. Here, voices must be gentle. Here, even breathing feels like a ceremony. And the people inside, they walk like monks in a monastery of ink. Aisles of discovery. Wandering through a library is different from browsing the web. There's no algorithm, no targeted ads, no pop-ups, just shelves. One book leads to another, and then, suddenly, you're lost. But the good kind of lost. The kind where you don't want to be found. You came for a history book. Now you're reading about sea monsters, or Icelandic sagas, or how to pickle vegetables. In 18th century Poland, libraries reward the curious and the aimless. The sound of turning pages. It's almost a rhythm. Flip, pause, flip. You hear it in every corner. Soft, steady, like raindrops on parchment. No clicks, no swipes, just fingers, and paper, and thought. Each page turned is a little act of faith. Maybe the next one will be even better. The card catalog, the search before search. Before search engines, there was the card catalog. Wooden drawers, alphabetized, typed labels, little cards, each one a map. You'd pull one out with a satisfying SHHHH. Run your finger along the edges, and then follow the code to find the book on some distant shelf. It was slower, but somehow more alive. The search felt like a quest, and when you found it, the right book, waiting where it should be, you felt like a champion. Librarians, keepers of the flame. Not just people who say SHHH. No, librarians are guides, guardians, treasure keepers. They know where the secrets hide. They know which edition you want, and which one to avoid. They can find a quote from a book with no title, only a vague description, and a hopeful smile. And they do it, not for profit, not for fame, but because they believe that knowledge should be shared. They are the quiet heroes of civilization. Study desks in solitude. Remember those desks with the little wooden dividers? You'd sit in one, surrounded by silence, books stacked high, pencil in hand, your brain both full and strangely calm. Time moved differently there. The world outside melted. All that mattered was the page in front of you. Even if you didn't finish the chapter, you'd feel like you'd traveled somewhere further than most people do. On a plane, the weight of borrowing. You didn't own the books. You borrowed them, which made them more precious. You turned pages carefully. You remembered the due date. You tucked them in your bag, like something fragile. There was honor in it, in returning something, so someone else could discover it next. It wasn't consumption. It was sharing, a chain of minds, linked by the same pages. Silence is a gift. The silence in a library isn't empty. It's full of potential, of stories waiting, of thoughts forming. It's not a silence of boredom. It's the silence of readiness, of possibility. You're not just in a room. You're in a garden, where minds bloom quietly, And that silence, it becomes part of you, slowing your thoughts, softening your breath, making you listen to your own mind. For once, the library at night. The best libraries? They're almost magical. At night, lights low, desks half filled, shadows between the stacks. You can almost hear the books breathing, and you wonder, what if they could speak? What if they whispered to each other when no one's around? Ancient poems chatting with physics manuals, cookbooks laughing with travel memoirs, ghost stories daring biographies to come alive. It's a dream, but in a library at night, it feels real. You're not just surrounded by books, you're surrounded by souls. The train station, where every journey begins with a goodbye. Our journey takes us to a place where no one ever truly stays, but no one ever truly forgets. A place of heavy luggage, echoed footsteps, and announcements that fade into the distance. Welcome to the train station, not the sleek, digital terminals of today, where people scroll and sprint, but the old kind, where benches were wooden, clocks ticked loud, and every goodbye sounded just a little like forever. So let's sit together on a cold bench by track 9 and remember what it felt like to go somewhere slowly, the weight of departure. The train station is a place between places. You're not quite gone, not quite arrived, just waiting. And in that space, there's a quiet kind of grief and a quiet kind of hope. People hug too long here, or not long enough. Some laugh, pretending it doesn't hurt to say goodbye. Some cry, not caring who sees. And others, well, they just sit, watching, thinking, listening for the whistle. That means it's time. The architecture of waiting. Old train stations were built to impress. Vaulted ceilings, arched windows, columns that reached toward the sky, as if to say, your journey matters, even if it's just 2 towns over, even if no one's there to greet you. The station gave it dignity. It was the kind of place where you could feel both tiny and important at the same time. The clock that ticked too loud. There was always a big clock, hung high, unavoidable. It ticked like thunder. When you were late, it crawled like molasses. When you were early, every second meant something. A missed minute could mean a missed train. A missed train could mean a missed chance. So you watched it, like it might change its mind. But it never did. Clocks and train stations are honest and merciless. The voice over the intercom. Do you remember that voice? Not a person, but a presence. Soft crackle. A pause. And then, train 243 to Portland, now boarding at platform 6. She never rushed. She never shouted. Even when storms rolled in and tracks were frozen, her voice was calm, reassuring, like a lullaby for travelers on edge. You didn't know her name, but you trusted her. She was the guardian of order and direction, tickets and timetables. You didn't book with an app. You stood in line, at a window, with a person. You told them where you were going, and they gave you a ticket, a real one, cardboard, stamped, folded. It felt like permission, a key, a story about to unfold. And the timetable? It was printed on thick paper, folded into squares. You'd unfold again and again, until it looked like a treasure map. In a way, it was. The platform, a stage for emotions. The platform was where everything happened. Goodbyes, reunions, last looks, first steps. It smelled like metal and smoke, old oil, cold air. You could hear trains breathing, engines sighing, Wheels ticking slowly forward. Couples kissed. Kids waved. Grandparents stood with trembling hands, holding out little bags of food. They knew you wouldn't eat, but took anyway. The train was coming. But for a moment, everything paused. And then, that long whistle. Deep. Lonely. Final. The train itself. Not a bullet. Not a blur. But a machine. With presence. Heavy. Loud. Alive. Doors slid open. With a hiss. Steps folded down. Like invitations. You climbed aboard. And found your seat. Sometimes by a window. Sometimes next to a stranger. Who'd fall asleep on your shoulder. 20 minutes in. The seats weren't fancy. But they rocked. Just enough. To lull you. And soon. The world outside. Began to slide away. The view from the window. Trains don't just take you places. They show you them. Fields. Hills. Factories. Backyards with swing sets. Rivers reflecting gray skies. Abandoned barns. With stories they never got to finish. You watched it all. Silent. Still. The train kept moving. But your mind wandered. Maybe to where you were going. Maybe to where you'd been. Maybe just nowhere. And that was enough. The soft noise of travel. There's a rhythm to a train ride. The hum of the engine. The occasional horn in the distance. The clack, 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 clack. As wheels pass over seams in the track. It becomes a lullaby. You watch the world blur. Your thoughts slow. And soon, your eyes close. Dreaming. In motion. Moving forward. Without having to steer. Just trusting. That the tracks know the way. Arrivals and returns. Eventually, every train stops. You step off. Stretching legs stiff from stillness. Sometimes, someone is waiting. Waving. Smiling. Running forward with arms out. Other times, no one is. Just a new place. A new sky. New footsteps to follow. But either way, you carry something. Not just luggage, but memory. The train ride lives inside you now. The voices. The window scenes. The long, low whistle. That meant it was time to go. Handwritten letters. Messages that took their time. You've journeyed through foggy streets. Through ticking clocks and whistling trains. Tonight, let's return to something. Smaller. Softer. Slower. Not a place this time. But a thing. A folded piece of paper. A bit of ink. A whisper sent across distance. By human hands. Tonight, we open the quiet world. Of the handwritten letter. Take your time. There's no rush here. Letters never minded waiting. Before the ping. Once upon a time. When you wanted to speak to someone far away. You didn't type. You wrote. You sat at a desk. Or on a bed. Or at a cafe table by a rainy window. And you thought. And you felt. And you took pen to paper. The moment didn't pass quickly. It stretched. It invited you to dwell in it. There were no red dots. No alerts. No typing indicators. Only the flow of words. From your hand. To the page. And from your heart. Into theirs. The paper and the pen. Not just any paper. You choisit. Cream-colored, maybe. With a slight texture. Something that felt like it could keep secrets. And the pen. A favorite, perhaps. The one that didn't skip. The one with ink dark enough. To feel serious. You opened with a date. Maybe a location. Then a greeting that felt more personal. Than any hey. Or hi. Ever could. It began slowly. Deliberately. And suddenly. You were in it. The pace of thought. Writing by hand. Slowed you down. You couldn't backspace. You couldn't rearrange. Each sentence. Had to live with the next. so you considered your words. You let silence fill the space. Between paragraphs, you doodled in the margins. You underlined, circled, added little arrows. To say, this part really matters. You laughed when your lines went crooked. And sometimes, your tears smudged the ink. But you kept writing, because a letter wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, folding and sealing. When it was finished, you held it in your hands. Not just a message, but a piece of yourself. You folded it carefully, slipped it into an envelope, licked the seal, pressed it shut. Then came the stamp, a small piece of art that said, "I'm ready to travel." And finally, your handwriting. On the front, their name, their street, their city. Sometimes, you added a little note in the corner. Open when alone. Read this slowly. Or simply, for you, the long wait. You dropped it into a mailbox. Red or blue, or rusty brown. And then, you waited. Not minutes. Not hours. Days. Weeks even. The letter was out there now, traveling through hands. Planes. Trucks. Sorting centers that smelled like ink and dust. And on the other side, someone you cared about would open a door, check a box, and find your voice, wrapped in paper, receiving a letter. Oh, the magic of receiving one. You saw your name in someone else's handwriting. Maybe you recognized the curve of their YS, the way they always dotted their IS. A little to the left. Your fingers tingled. Before you even opened it, you held it, like it might break. And when you opened it, well, it was like they were there, in the room, talking, laughing, pausing between thoughts, just as they did in person. Letters had tone, emotion. Wait, you read them slowly, more than once, and you never threw them away. Love and ink. Some of the most beautiful things ever said between two people were written in letters, declarations, apologies, confessions, dreams. There's something about paper that makes people say what they couldn't say out loud. Maybe it's the distance. Maybe it's the slowness. Maybe it's the safety of knowing the words can't be interrupted. People told the truth in letters. They poured their hearts into the empty spaces. And when you read one from someone you loved, it didn't just say, "I miss you." It felt like a touch. Letters from afar. Soldiers wrote from trenches. Travelers wrote from trains. Prisoners wrote behind bars. Children wrote home from camp. And always, someone waited for the reply. Letters bridged wars, oceans, lifetimes. They told stories no phone call could hold. And they lingered, long after the moment had passed. You could find a letter, years later, in a drawer, and feel the person, all over again. That's the thing about letters. They don't disappear. When the screen goes dark, the endings we kept. Letters ended gently. Love always. Forever yours. Write back soon. Or simply, with all my heart. You folded it once more. Tucked it into a book. Or a box. Or under your pillow. And there it stayed, waiting to be reread. When the world felt too loud, letters were anchors. Reminders. Soft little echoes of moments that mattered. The forgotten art of doing nothing. By now, your journey through time has taken you to libraries, train stations, and the humble, handwritten letter. But tonight, we arrive at something more subtle, more elusive, something many of us have forgotten, something ancient, yet deeply necessary. Tonight, we explore the art of doing nothing. So sit back, let the world fade away. For a moment, it's okay to just be. The lost craft of stillness. Once upon a time, people knew how to rest. Not just sleep, not just relax, but to be still, without feeling guilty, without looking for something to do. They'd sit in a chair, stare at a tree, let their thoughts wander, without chasing them down. There were no demands, no notifications, no deadlines hanging over their heads. It was time to simply be. The noisy world we left behind. And then the world got louder. Phones rang. Alarm clocks buzzed. Sirens blared. And somewhere along the way, we lost the art of silence. We forgot that stillness wasn't empty. It wasn't lazy. It wasn't wasted time. Stillness is full of possibility. It is the space between thoughts, the pause between breaths, the moment before you decide. But now, we fill every moment with noise, with tasks, with apps that demand our attention. We've forgotten how to just do nothing, the gift of daydreams. In the past, people spent time just letting their minds wander. Daydreaming wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a way to let your thoughts roam, to explore ideas without pressure. Somewhere in those drifting moments, you might stumble across your next big idea, or simply feel a quiet peace, in the absence of direction. But now, we scroll, we click, we consume, and we forget the simple joy of doing nothing at all, the slowness of unhurried time. Do you remember when time moved slower? When you weren't in a rush to do everything? When the slow, gentle rhythm of life felt comfortable? Doing nothing didn't feel like an inconvenience. It felt like a break, like a chance to breathe, to exist without expectation. Today, we think every second must be filled with tasks, with entertainment, with something to justify our time. But there is beauty in unhurried time, in moments where nothing is demanded, where you simply exist in the moment. The importance of boredom. Once boredom was an old friend, a familiar guest. It didn't scare you. You didn't run from it. You knew it meant rest, space, the opportunity to let your mind wander. Boredom was the fertile soil, where creativity grew, where ideas bloomed, unforced. Today, boredom is a threat. It's something we avoid at all costs. We fill it with noise. We fill it with work. We fill it with distractions. But in truth, boredom is a gift, a chance to slow down, to reconnect with ourselves. The power of sitting still. Do you remember the last time you sat still? Really still. Not fidgeting. Not checking your phone. Just sitting. There is power in it. A quiet strength that comes from being present. It doesn't require any effort. No struggle. Just being there. In the moment. Without expectation. Sometimes sitting still is enough. And in that silence, you might hear your own thoughts more clearly than ever before. The world outside and the inner landscape. When was the last time you simply sat outside? Not on your phone. Not with a book. Just sat. The world around you moves. Quietly. Birds flit. Leaves rustle. Clouds drift. And in that moment, time stretches out. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. Just sit. Let the world continue on its own course. And in that stillness, you might discover something you didn't expect. The world outside is always moving. But inside, you have a choice to be still. The beauty of doing nothing together. We think we need to be doing something all the time. Even when we're with others, we fill conversations with noise. We fill moments with busyness. But there's beauty in sitting with someone. In silence. In doing nothing together. There's a special kind of connection. When two people are simply present with each other. When words aren't needed. When you share a quiet moment. Without expectation or obligation. Sometimes just being together without the need to do, can bring you closer than words ever could. The reset we forgot to take. Do you ever feel like you're constantly running? Like you're always moving, always busy? It's easy to forget that doing nothing is a way of resetting. When your mind is overstuffed with tasks, when your body feels worn out, doing nothing isn't a waste of time. It's the only way to recharge, to give yourself space to breathe, to simply exist. It's okay to step back, to pause. In a world that moves too fast, doing nothing is the quiet rebellion. It's the gentle act of honoring your own humanity, the peace of letting go. So tonight, let yourself rest in the stillness. Put aside the need to do, the need to perform, the need to fill the space. Let yourself just be. There's peace in doing nothing, and peace in letting go of expectations. As you lay your head down tonight, let the quiet embrace you. No thoughts to chase, no tasks to complete, no screens to check. Just you. In this moment. Breathe. Let go. And know, sometimes, doing nothing is the most important thing of all. Good night. And with that, your journey through the history of forgotten things comes to an end. May you find peace in the quiet. And remember, the art of doing nothing is never truly forgotten.